Hey there, software engineering students, and welcome to this explainer. I am a software architect, and let me tell you, over my career, I've had to choose the right process model for literally countless real-world systems. So if you've ever stared blankly at a massively long, vague scenario question on your SDLC exam, just completely struggling to choose the absolute best process model out of a bunch that all seem right, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're going to decode your course material so you can master these tricky scenarios like an absolute pro. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our quick game plan for today. We'll hit 1. The exam dilemma, 2. Waterfall versus Agile basics, 3. The Agile mindset, 4. The Agile life cycle, 5. Frameworks under the umbrella, and finally, 6. Exam scenarios and our decision framework. All right, starting right off with Section 1, the exam dilemma, choosing the right model. Look, we all know the pain of taking an SDLC exam. You get this incredibly vague paragraph about some fictional company building a piece of software, and honestly, multiple choice answers feel like they could theoretically work. But the secret to actually passing these exams, it isn't just memorizing textbook definitions. You have to put on your architect hat. You need to read the scenario and hunt for specific trigger words. These are little clues intentionally planted by your professor that map directly to a model's unique characteristics. Which brings us to Section 2, Waterfall versus Agile basics. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. To spot those trigger words, we first need to establish the foundational differences. Traditional waterfall, it flows downward in rigid, sequential, linear stages. Define, design, code, test, implement. It relies heavily on upfront planning, super in-depth documentation, and a close project manager calling the shots. Basically, it's best for simple, unchanging projects. In stark contrast, Agile is a continuous cycle. Requirements, planning, design, development, release, and tracking. It relies on small, high-functioning teams, flexible evolution, and really deep customer involvement. Moving right along to Section 3, the Agile mindset and manifesto. To really lock down those exam answers, you have to understand exactly why Agile was created in the first place. And this quote, it's an absolute goldmine. Traditional models frankly struggled with rigid plans, late testing, and terrible responses to changing requirements. So, if an exam scenario describes an uncertain environment, or maybe a fast-paced business, that is a massive blinking neon trigger word. You absolutely must prioritize adaptability and speed in that case, which points you straight to Agile. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the Agile Manifesto explicitly tells us what it prioritizes. It values individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It values working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and most importantly, responding to change over following a plan. So while those traditional tools definitely have value, Agile explicitly values flexibility way more. Building on that, focus on these specific highlights for your exam. Things like delivering valuable software early, welcoming changing requirements, daily collaboration, and motivated individuals. If a test scenario mentions frequent delivery or a client suddenly needing to change requirements late in development, Agile is undeniably your answer. No question. Okay, Section 4, the Agile lifecycle. Let's move from theory to practice for a second and see how a project actually flows over time. The Agile life cycle continuously cycles through 6 distinct phases: concept, inception, iteration, release, maintenance, and retirement. But the absolute core engine here is the iteration phase. Remember this specific detail for your test. Agile iterations are usually just 2 to 4 weeks long. So if a project timeline requires short 2 to 4 week delivery windows, boom, you are looking at an Agile workflow. Section 5, Frameworks under the umbrella. Okay, pay attention, because here is a classic trap professors absolutely love to set. They might not actually use the word Agile in the multiple choice options. You need to know that Agile is really an umbrella term for several specific methodologies. The most popular frameworks you're going to see are Scrum, which is a management framework for iterative development, Extreme Programming, or XP, which focuses on developer-centric technical practices, and Kanban, a visual workflow system. So if the scenario screams Agile, but the only options are Waterfall, Spiral, and Scrum, Scrum is your answer. And finally, Section 6, Exam Scenarios and Framework. Let's move to the good stuff and see how this all builds into your actual decision framework. This right here is the practical cheat sheet you need. When you're reading a scenario, mentally map out the constraints. Are the requirements changing or unchanging? Is the documentation supposed to be minimal, or is it heavily planned up front? As an architect, I'm also looking closely at risk level and budget. See, Agile handles high-risk, rapidly changing environments beautifully, while Waterfall is often demanded for fixed-budget, low-risk, predictable contracts. Mapping these constraints will honestly solve 90% of your questions. To boil it all down, adaptability, early delivery, changing requirements. That's a massive green light for Agile. Rigid plans, heavy documentation, simple and unchanging scopes, total red flag for Agile. Go ahead and choose Waterfall. Now, I know you guys want to make it harder. You want to prep for those tricky scenarios where two models seem totally correct, but only one is actually best, right? Well, let's step up the difficulty. Practice question 1. A client wants a simple software tool, requirements won't change, and they want a massive upfront design document. The trap here is the phrase, simple tool, which might immediately make you think of a quick, snappy, agile sprint. But look closer. The client literally demands a massive upfront design document and guarantees the requirements won't change. Because of these huge red flags for fixed scopes and heavy documentation, Agile is out. Waterfall is the exact correct model here. Question 2. A startup building a new app in a fast-paced environment needs a working version in 3 weeks. So the crucial point is that students might desperately scan the paragraph for the exact word iteration and panic when they don't see it. But fast-paced business environment and 3 weeks to test the market, those are massive trigger words. They need early delivery of value to handle market uncertainty. Agile is the clear winner here. Question 3. 2 teams. Team A uses a project manager and documents. Team B uses daily face-to-face communication and motivated individuals. This one tests if you actually read the Agile Manifesto. Team A is using the heavyweight, document-driven approach of traditional waterfall, but Team B, they rely on daily face-to-face communication and self-organizing teams. Even if they don't explicitly say the word Scrum, Team B is directly citing the manifesto's core value of individuals and interactions. Team B is absolutely Agile. Question 4. Halfway through, a competitor releases a feature, the client panics and wants to completely pivot. This is a classic, super tricky scenario. Changing direction halfway through development sounds like a total disaster that would break your budget and timelines. A rigid sequential model like Waterfall would entirely shatter here. But Agile is literally built for this exact scenario. It explicitly welcomes changing requirements late in development to give the customer a competitive advantage. Agile is the only correct choice here. Okay, final question. The client wants frequent testing, no heavy documentation, and wants to see working software every 2 weeks. It's a trap if you overthink it. Valuing working software over comprehensive documentation, combined with a literal 2-week delivery window, that is the absolute textbook definition of the Agile workflow. Agile takes it for the win. So what does this all mean for you? By understanding the fundamental motivations behind these models, exactly why Waterfall needs absolute certainty up front and why Agile practically thrives in chaos, you no longer have to guess. Just think like a true architect. Spot those professor-planted trigger words, dodge the red flags, and you will completely ace your methodology exam. Apply this decision framework to your studies, and you're going to do fantastic. Good luck.